Right, so I'm in talk with Adrian Luna from the Webscale, who has really a great experience in the sales and channel, and he is going to answer, all our queries regarding this cloud availability in Magento and other things. Even I have a lot of questions, and there is a lot of other questions that I get from client. So I am going to ask you a lot of questions. I have prepared a long list of questions to ask you actually. So first of all, I want to know one thing. I was surfing from a website and I read this beautiful line that says Magento in cloud. So, how do you explain this?
Yeah, absolutely. So Webscale is deployed as a cloud native software as a service delivered company, right? So we can apply that to multiple different aspects of what an e-commerce merchant would want. So as it pertains to cloud infrastructure, we pride ourselves in being cloud agnostic, meaning whether it's AWS, whether it's Google Cloud, whether it's Microsoft Azure, it's not really for us to dictate where the production environment should be hosted. I mean, we obviously have recommendations on cloud delivery, but we also have the ability to offer that flexibility if a client, merchant, or partner prefers one public cloud service or another. And then as it pertains to Magento, or I guess as we should call it now, Adobe Commerce, we've built value around the concept of having, multiple layers of support in our entire staff and personnel built of experts that have supported the application before, that have experience in what the Adobe and Magento ecosystem needs specifically, separate from other applications in e-commerce. And to be able to offer our cloud delivery services again as a software as a service, so we stay on the cutting edge of some of the trends that are in front of us, right? So I think by operating the way that we have, we really make it a point to stay ahead of any curves, any trends that we see coming around the corner, any feedback we get from our partner group, just to make sure that our partners and our merchants have what they need to be successful, as modern commerce tends to evolve. So hopefully that answers your question, but yeah, that's us.
That's an absolute answer, sir. Next I would like to request you to tell our audience something about you, being a part of this evolution, because you have been really associated with this company since a long time. So I just want to, understand the perception of evolution from your end and from your participation in this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a really good question. I actually I kind of pattern, the evolution of my own career and the choices I make in where I want to be in modern technology, and that's really what brought me to Webscale. I came here in January, early February of 2020, so right before the world turned upside down. It was an interesting time to join a new company, but a few reasons that drove me here were being in channel, working with SI, global agency, development partners. I have had the luxury of being able to speak with some incredibly intelligent application developers, right? These are really the people, the individuals, the organizations that are driving commerce in the direction that it is. So, they're basically taking requests from merchants and saying, this is what you're asking me to do, and this is how I build it. And then the SIs and agencies in turn, turn to the cloud delivery companies and say, hey, this is what our merchants are requiring, and I need you to be able to do these things, right? And I felt that when I joined Webscale, aside from the decision to change the direction of my career and move here, I was also looking at the technology and the trends in the e-commerce ecosystem in general, right? So we started to see that portions of the application were beginning to decouple from each other. There's separation going on. There's lots of integration from other third-party software deliver services. And the traditional way of hosting things just wasn't cutting it for a lot of the partners that that I had done business with for a long period of time. So, enter Webscale, ultimate flexibility, some of the things that I talked about, a second ago. It really gives me the flexibility to be able to offer the things that our partners are actually asking us to do. So yeah, that's a bit of my background, a bit of what drove me here, and again, I'd like to pattern my own career decisions and move into working with somebody that is in the cutting edge side of technology.
That's really amazing and of course motivating for the people like me.
Mhm.
So, I have a personal question to ask you because, delivering the cloud services or, software as a services is not an easy thing. We deal with a lot of, lot of challenges and obstacles. So I want to know, as an agency, how do you handle QA and testing?
Well, actually, so as we're not an agency directly, right? So our software delivery model is meant to manage cloud delivery. It's meant for automating the management of these complex infrastructure environments that are actually acting as the production environment for the application, right? We do a ton of Q&A testing, but a lot of it obviously is applied to the cloud delivery and also to security vulnerabilities and things like that. So if you kind of look at the pillars of what we offer, there's cloud delivery, there's 360-degree security, there's making sure that the infrastructure is built in a way that it can maintain performance for the application. And then obviously, when I mentioned 360-degree security, it's making sure that things are secure from the edge all the way to the back end. There's a lot of systems of checks and balances. There's a lot of monitoring that's going on our part. And that's part of our responsibility in making sure that we're maintaining the health of the application that our merchants have trusted us with is to constantly check and make sure that we're monitoring traffic in that data path. We're analyzing for any anomalies, we're analyzing for any malicious activity out front, and making sure things like that and threats don't actually end up getting into the production environment where they can do harm. So you see a lot of news articles, I'd say monthly at this point, where there's a new ransomware attack, there's some sort of malware attack, there's people are launching large scale bot attacks, things like that. And as a modern commerce cloud delivery company, we do feel that there are aspects of security that still pertain to us in terms of what we're responsible for. So for Q&A, obviously there's constant 24/7, 365 monitoring. Our software is really built to be a very sophisticated monitoring tool, to consistently analyze for performance and security issues.
That's really great. So, that excites me to ask you,
Mhm.
what's your, project management style? What it is actually, how do you actually manage it and how do you, plan it? Because, the way you have explained, it's really cumbersome, something really complex to achieve. So, what's your
Right.
project management style?
I'm glad you pointed that out because what we do is incredibly complex. It is incredibly cumbersome. And it's also our duty to make sure that that complexity and level of bandwidth that it takes to manage a project such as a migration or such as a new site launch doesn't land squarely on the shoulders of the merchant, right? So if we step back a little bit from the project management and we look at the request, a merchant will typically take a request to their solution integrator, their agency, or their in-house development team and say, this is what we need built. These are the features and functionalities we need. Now you guys go build it so I can go focus on my business and what I launch my business to do. Where we do is that project management then takes two different directions, right? There's application level code build management. There's code deployment and upgrade management, obviously. And then there's what's done on the infrastructure side of things, and all of that is security and the architectural design of the cloud environment and all of that. So our project management style, honestly, is to start in the pre-sales discovery. So whenever we get a project that comes through either a partner of ours or even directly from a merchant, is to identify what are the needs, what's the current environment look like, what are the reasons why you're looking to move this over to a new company. Typically, those things are there's scalability concerns, there's security concerns. There's availability concerns where this storefront has become mission critical to a merchant, and if it's down for even a minute, it could mean thousands or even millions of dollars lost for some of our largest merchants. So we want to make sure in the early pre-sales and the discovery process that we get as much information as we possibly can, so then when we begin to architect the solution, we're taking that on, right? The cumbersome part of it is having the merchant answer some of these questions for us and having the SI fill in the blanks on the technology side of how it's built. And then we take that burden off of both the merchant and the partner, and we move into the design phase. after we've agreed upon an architecture and a software plan and all of that good stuff, then we move into onboarding, which is a provisioning process, moves into client acceptance process, and that moves into a pre-live checklist that should lend itself to a go live, ready date. And then we have a team. We basically have our team separated, so you constantly have multiple members of the team with eyes on the project. So everybody from the salesperson to the solutions architect, potentially the channel account manager that knows the partner in depth and wants to make sure that things go smoothly for that partner. And then on into our provisioning team, our support team, and eventually our customer success. So we've really built our company and separated the resources in our company in teams that manage everything from the very minute that you say you need help with something, all the way into customer success and ongoing support.
Great. So, because we know that Magento is headed and it's like the biggest opportunities for e-retailers, right? So how much do you relate to this statement? And the next thing is because of course it depends with the project to project and it varies from project to project, but if you have to generalize it kind of, so how much time or how much this development process, how long does it take to complete a development process for any sort of generic project that comes for the Magento to any on-demand project?
Yeah, good question. So a lot of our partners, and it does vary project to project. I mean, I think the type of client that we get, by the time one of our development partners has brought Webscale into the conversation, there's typically, I'd say, at least 3 to 6 months, I would say, of development work that's been done before they have a need to say, hey, I now need a staging environment. I need some user acceptance testing capabilities. We're ready to get what's going to end up being the production environment built, right? So there's a lot of hard work done by our agency and development partner network that happens behind the scenes before we really get involved. But I would say typically it's a 3 to 6 month process. I know a lot of our partners actually have rapid deployment packages and things like that, where it's a little bit more of a templated approach, but it's a custom templated approach, right? So you don't end up looking and feeling like every other site in the space that you play in as a merchant. But that cycle can be as short or as long as the project dictates. And again, by the time we get that, we understand that there's been a lot of hard work done in the scope of work that an agency had put together for the development project. So by the time we take that on, we're usually under the gun and ready to go with a go live date that we have to work backwards from. So we're working really hard to provision infrastructure and start working with CI/CD code deploy scripts and things like that with our partners to make sure that when the time comes and they're ready to commit the code, that it's moving into our service and that we're handling it from there and pushing that into the infrastructure. So yeah, I mean, as far as the total development timeline, I mean, I've seen it as short as 3 to 6 months, and obviously for incredibly large and complex projects, I've seen it much longer than that. But I think that's kind of the sign of knowing that you're working with the right people, is when they can, they can really push back a little bit and say, hey, Mr. Merchant, I appreciate how quickly you want to get this online, but we want to make sure that we're doing our diligence and building it correctly, so you're not having to go replatform or fix patches later on.
Yeah, I can totally relate to this. That's really helpful. But one more thing that I want to say, in today's time, Magento 2 marketplaces, these are helping a lot of retailers to break into the new markets. And because of this, COVID thing, this coronavirus and this lockdown, people have really, changed their mind or their perception of online shopping. So it has got a boom, right?
Right.
So, and then this cloud, software as a service is going to be the next big thing, and I guess it has already started. So as an expert, I want to ask you, as an expert, what do you want to suggest to those new retailers who want to have this cloud services in their Magento 2? So what are those key things that they need to know about online marketplaces, especially in Magento 2, when they want to deploy any cloud services? So what are those key things that they must keep a checkpoint on?
Yeah, well, when it comes to cloud services, I mean, there's multiple public cloud vendors at this point. AWS specifically is just the name that rises to the top. They've built brand recognition. We're AWS partners as well, so we get support directly from the cloud provider. And if there's anything that we need from a resource side of things, I mean, we have the ability to go directly to the public cloud provider, for any questions that we might have or anything that we might need. But how that benefits the merchants, right? So public cloud technology, if you look at where e-commerce has gone and now where this emergence of marketplaces, or in general, I guess this omni-channel look of how to deliver and reach your clients through multiple avenues, cloud technology has really seen a ton of growth right along the lines as e-commerce has done so, right? So, if you take a step back a little bit and say, why a cloud environment, why a provider that leans on public cloud technology as opposed to traditional servers and stacking and racking in a private data center? Well, for e-commerce specifically, there's a lot of volatility in the traffic, right? So that could be whether if they're building a custom marketplace or entering a marketplace, or really, again, building their own digital presence online to process these transactions. Cloud technology has the inherent elasticity, if built correctly and if managed correctly, to be able to accommodate for things like traffic fluctuations, to make sure that a storefront maintains performance as it scales, right? So I think the worst case scenario for any brand that's launching is actually their dream scenario, right? So those two things can go hand in hand. A dream scenario for a new startup that's launching an e-commerce storefront is to, let's say, an influencer or a celebrity to pick up their product line, or they appear on something like Shark Tank, and you go from having an average average visitor count per month that's pretty stable and something that you can kind of bank on day in and day out, to exploding to 3x, 5x, 10x of traffic. It's a dream scenario for some of these startups, and it's how a lot of them actually rapidly move into that enterprise space, even as a small company. It could also be a nightmare scenario if it was poorly architected and not on any type of elastic or scalable cloud environment. So, again, that's how we've really patterned our roadmap in that direction of scalability and availability, and we've used public cloud technology in order to do that, in order to be able to deliver.
Yeah. That's really great, but you have mentioned about AWS. So whether it's AWS or Google Cloud, as a cloud vendor, what values do you guys provide to the Magento Commerce?
Yeah, so same thing, right? So I think I kind of started with that. So the value is built on our concept of adopting modern commerce. So e-commerce 5 years ago is not the same as what it is now. Magento, exactly. When it launched, Magento 1 is not the same as Magento 2 and now Adobe Cloud, right? Or Adobe Commerce. So what we've done is because we have delivered ourselves and built that software as a service model, then we can stay ahead of that curve of what the merchants and the partners need and what they're requesting to be successful. And then we back up what the software is already doing in more of an automated fashion. We back that up and support it by true Magento and Adobe experts. These are people who have development backgrounds, who have infrastructure management backgrounds specifically for Magento as an application. So you're really being supported by somebody who not only knows your business, not only knows e-commerce, but also knows exactly what the application is capable of and what we need to protect it from.
In my limited experience, I came across a lot of merchants, and what I found, this is like, suppose if I'm a merchant, right, and I have a small team also along with solid developers. My team is full of solid developers. So in this case, in such cases, how would your services be advantageous in this case? Why should someone who is having a good team of developers, a small merchant or a big merchant, why should they go to any other any third party for these services? So in this case, in such kind of cases, because I have come across a lot of such cases, so how your services are going to be advantageous in these cases, and how we are going to tell them, how is it going to add a value, using your service to their existing infrastructure?
This is a very common use case, quite honestly, here at Webscale. So, again, because we are delivered as the SaaS model, merchants that have development teams can actually utilize us as a fully managed cloud management tool, or an extension, an additional resource to augment what they're already doing at the application level. Our job is to complement what those merchants are doing or what those development teams are doing, not really replace it. Now, what I've also seen is, development teams, in-house development teams, third-party development teams, regardless, they're meant to build, deploy, and manage code, right? They're meant to constantly monitor the application level maintenance to make sure it's doing what it was originally intended to do. So quite often we see merchants ask these same teams and task them with also managing the hosting infrastructure or cloud infrastructure, right? That's a full job in itself. It's the reason why, our company only focuses on that. So for instance, when an AWS service needs to be restarted at 2 a.m. on Sunday morning, it's our team that's handling that. It's not the backend development team. You're not pulling resources from somebody who has a development project on hand, or an upcoming live date for, a new Magento update that you need to deploy. It's the team that's responsible for the security and the infrastructure, and that could be at any day, any time, any day out of the year. So there's a ton of value in working with a company like Webscale to, again, right, to augment what you're doing from an application level, to merge and blend where code deployment ends and where that moves into infrastructure, and we take it from there. And then we consistently monitor, manage, and maintain that cloud environment so you don't have to at any day or time of the night.
That's really a smart answer, and I believe that all those people who would be watching this, they will be clear with this answer, and I hope that I'm not getting this question back from the merchants now. So yeah, so there are circumstances, and the most of the time a lot of merchants who come with one common query, because they do their research, they go to different parties, different third parties, and they think of deploying different cloud solutions and all other things, but they end up with one confusion. They are like, they would be looking for some kind of recommendation. So I want to ask you, because this is going to help those merchants really in a good way, like when it comes to Magento in a cloudy type environment. So is there ever a recommendation or a customer use case that would call for multiple admin instances? Because that's a very common question that I come through.
Yeah, that is a really good question. I would expect you guys to get that quite often. So our practice in designing architecture, and I talked about it earlier in the pre-sales discovery and understanding what the needs are. So this could be a multi-store configuration, it could be a single storefront configuration, regardless of what it is. If the admin duties need to be separated, right? And quite often if there's we don't want what the admin is doing, we don't want them to consume resources from what was meant for production. So as a company, we already deploy as a distributed architecture, right? So we're separating the web application tier from the backend database, from any third-party search services, and we can extend that into separating out admin duties into their own admin server instances. And we do that because there's a couple of reasons. One, there's a security implication of anybody accessing admin and it not being directly located within production. And then the other portion of it is just purely for performance, right? Anything that's being changed or added and removed in there, we want that separated from the rest of the environment. So I would say, as a practice, a standard practice, I don't even consider it a best case practice. It really is a standard practice for us to deploy any environment with multiple portions of the application separated and being able to handle its own duties. And we extend that same practice into admin instances. So again, we ask a lot of questions. It might seem like an interrogation in the pre-sales or discovery process, but we're only doing it so we could build the absolute best cloud infrastructure for that storefront, for that client, and for the partner that we're supporting them with.
So basically, there is no any best ever recommendation in this use case, right?
Yeah, I mean, again, right? It's I would say the recommendation is to separate the admin from, have its own admin server or admin instance, and have
Yeah.
that separated from production. And again, if there is a need for multiple admin instances because we do deploy as a custom architecture, absolutely. If the need is there and there's a reason for it, then let us handle, deploying multiple admin instances and make sure that they tie in to where they're supposed to be. And we manage routing, we manage code deployment and everything.
Also, it's like if I am running an infrastructure, I have deployed your services, right? So, a lot of people ask, or they have, this aspiration, like, is there any way to, way more to speed than just infrastructure running the site?
You say speed up infrastructure?
Yeah, is there a way more to speed than just infrastructure running this site? More to speed up, because that's a common thing people come across.
No, absolutely, very common. I think, and I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but I think the last thing I saw is it was like for every 7 millisecond delay in a site's response time, there's a certain amount of annual revenue that's lost from that. I mean, speed is key.
Yeah.
There's even changes being made right now to Google's core Web Vitals, that need to be monitored and maintained as well. So again, it really goes back to, first of all, not all cloud deployment providers are made alike, right? You could really replicate a static server environment in the public cloud and not really, accommodate or build or optimize for performance. So meaning if you're utilizing cloud infrastructure, but you're still doing it all on one server, meaning application, database, search, third party, everything else, you're not building something that's optimized for each portion of the infrastructure being able to handle its own job. So just to kind of reiterate what I was talking about before, is that each cloud service should have its own responsibility. It should have its own portion of the entire infrastructure as the application was designed. And as a standard, we believe that the application pieces should be split up at minimum into the web app tier, the backend database. I mean, we use Amazon AWS RDS typically as the backend database service because of its speed, and then we offload other portions into its own NFS container and other third-party containers for services like search and things like that. Separate from the cloud architecture that's being built for performance, I think where we really add a ton of value is the software that we've deployed that sits out in front of production environments. So edge delivery is king right now in e-commerce or anything that that's security or delivery focused outside of where the core application is hosted, right? And we've really been built to deliver additional layers of cache, along with security enhancements, in order to block some of the bad traffic from consuming the precious resources from production, and then doing so while delivering even CDN functionality or pairing with a merchant's existing CDN provider to deliver other static content. So again, it just all goes back to, our idea that modern commerce and cloud delivery, it's our responsibility to manage the data path outside of the production servers, and not just say, it's our responsibility to make sure the servers are fast, but be just as much of an edge service provider as we are a cloud delivery provider. So in terms of performance, everything from the outer edge where mobile devices, laptops, notepads, tablets, everything is hitting the storefronts, making sure that we manage that from edge all the way to the back end.
That's really great. But a couple of days back, like a couple of weeks back, I guess, I got a question from the client, and it's a really an interesting question, and I guess you would be the perfect person to answer this. So the question was, as a client, how can someone do an honest evaluation on different hosting offerings?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I think it starts with the understanding of your own business needs first, right? So it's a bit of a self-evaluation. So, what are the business's needs now, short term? What are the long-term goals of, where that business thinks they're going to be, or they've really, planned their roadmap around, and you could tie that into revenue. You could tie it into traffic. You could tie it into a business, launching as a regional player, but having aspirations eventually to move into global attraction of merchants, right? We launched with a focus on e-commerce because in this space, it requires the most elasticity, it requires flexibility, it requires things that traditional hosting providers just weren't offering. So getting back to the questions that a merchant should ask for e-commerce specific hosting, first and foremost, has modern cloud technology been adopted? Are you buying into something that's a static server environment, or are you buying into a service provider that has already adopted public cloud technology and the best in breed services that are available to host the environment? That's first. If not, and you're launching as a new startup, I'd say, that is a really quick way to disqualify somebody from really being best for the storefront. Second part of it is, does that provider have an immense experience in the application that you want to host? So if we're talking Magento, Adobe Commerce here, do they have a support team? Do they have solution architects? Are they actually building and designing the infrastructure for you and for the application that you have? And then if you extend that into those merchants with large catalogs or large traffic fluctuations, is the provider offering true horizontal scaling, right? And when I say true, I want to make sure that this scaling capability is truly automated, as opposed to needing to notify the provider that, hey, I'm expecting a traffic surge to come in tomorrow night, right? Can you guys be ready? It goes back to the instance or the scenario that I was talking to you before about, which is, you deploy a new product, your traffic is stable, and all of a sudden an influencer, a celebrity, somebody picks it up, snaps a picture on their Instagram, and their 50 million followers also see, and want to go to your website, and want to purchase the shoes from their favorite influencer, right? So if something like that were to happen, you don't have any notification that you could provide the provider beforehand. So that elasticity and scalability needs to be automated. It needs to be able to accommodate the surge without anybody knowing it's coming.
Yeah, I guess then this is really going to help the client who has asked this question. I really hope he will watch this podcast and all the queries would be answered here now. So, for any client, what I have observed, any client, before deploying any solution or purchasing any module, they are more into experiencing or testing the demos, right? They do not want to purchase anything just by reading the documentation and the advertisement nowadays, especially in this e-commerce sector. Mm-hmm. So they are more like they want to test the demos, they want to see any demo session. So there was one question the client was asking, are there any cloud demos to the test speed of the site? So is there a possibility for that? Is there any demos to that?
Good question. I think you got to understand, or anybody, right? The merchant partner has got to kind of understand the nature of cloud delivery or the nature of cloud hosting. So, yes, there are capabilities to do a test, right? But I think a true test would be very cumbersome, meaning you'd have to, get a dev copy created. You'd have to replicate, this distributed architecture that I'm talking about. You're basically reproducing a production environment and throwing traffic at it to see how it performs. What we do and what we find more effective is we have the capability to be able to take traffic logs and run those logs through our software and actually report on the various areas where improvements can and should be made. So we do those things in order to say, hey, look, let's do a much faster turnaround in the analysis of what's going on. Most of the providers right now, from what we see, don't really offer any visibility into the data path, into the traffic, into response times, into how the infrastructure performed when a request was made. So again, that's what our software is kind of built to do already for our existing cloud delivery clients. But we can actually offer that up as a service beforehand to, again, take some of those app server logs, any type of logs that we need to be able to run that traffic through Webscale software and be able to spit those reports back. And a lot of times what that ends up is the merchant is extremely comfortable and says, wow, this is more data that I've gotten from you in 48 hours than I've ever gotten from the provider that I've worked with for years. And typically, that's quite often that's enough to have them, buy into what we're doing. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. I think once you get into our onboarding, provisioning, and ongoing support, we clients stick with us for a very long time for that reason.
Okay, so sometimes, and probably this has happened a lot of times also, it's like the new merchants and people, like in general, people are not aware about, because of this is really complex the way you have explained it, and now I understand this is really complex and full of intricacy. So in such cases, the people who are naive or who are new to this cloud services, so how anyone can know that if Magento 2 cloud offers a test drive? I mean, is there a way how can someone know about it? And if it is, then what would be the cost per Google user session? This is one thing that people are really cautious about, how much even the demo services or anything which is going to charge them.
Yeah, so, absolutely. Another great question. If you put these together, you did a really good job. So getting to the test drives, right? I think, again, getting back to what I was saying, I think the best case scenario is to kind of showcase what we're doing at the software level, and to be able to demo that through running those logs through the software and managing the reporting of that, and really showing, hey, this is where things are being hung up, this is where improvements can be made. And then the next step would be for us to actually go and build out what the architecture should look like and present that to them. In terms of cost per Google user session, that's a little bit different, right? So, we're not fans of a cost per session. We definitely have baselines of where we say, hey, at so many users hitting the storefront, this is where we feel that a baseline architecture should be starting at for a project like this, and then we can adjust up or down from there. But because we do price every project differently, we try not to make clients or merchants or even the partners that are referring clients to us feel like we're trying to force somebody into a box, right? So again, we start with baseline numbers. One of the big, and I do want to get into this because cost is obviously, it's always a question. It's always how much is it going to be. Specifically for public cloud cost, it can get very volatile as well. I have seen merchants who have tried to make the jump into a public cloud provider and quickly see that the costs skyrocket because they don't really understand what they're being billed by. There's there's the usage of the services, there's bandwidth costs, there's so many variable costs that your month can seriously fluctuate, or your price can seriously fluctuate from month to month. So what we do is, instead of charging those incredibly fluctuating variable levers that we pull in order to formulate a bill at the end of the month, we build out an architecture that then we can present a baseline cost, actually a standard cost, and more than a baseline, that they can actually bank on month in and month out. So if you purchase a plan for a certain amount of dollars per month, you can bank on that cost. It's going to be the same month after month after month. And it's our responsibility to make sure that client has the ability for the infrastructure to expand when it needs to. And then after traffic subsides, to be able to consolidate back to where it was originally architected, but not necessarily pass that cost through to the client. So they get the luxury of having a scalable and elastic infrastructure without having to pay for those additional services when additional servers are added to the cluster for minutes or days or hours, right? So I'm not sure if that completely answered your question, but our take is to make sure that these questions actually don't come up, because when we present a price, that price is standard and it's stable.
Okay, so that actually doesn't fluctuate much. If you say that standard and stable, so that means it does not fluctuate much.
Yeah,
it's like consolidated in a general way. In a general way, I can assume it like it's a consolidated price and it does not fluctuate much, right? But of course, it depends upon the different requirements and the infrastructure expandability. So may I?
Yeah, no, absolutely. You nailed it right there, right? We have clients that on a daily basis expand the amount of servers that are being used because they have traffic, right? And then once that traffic subsides, the server count, reduces, right? The amount of servers that were created to accommodate for the traffic are then terminated, and that cluster is reduced. We don't pass those charges on to the end client for that period of time that 2, 3, 4, 6, 10 servers were added to the cluster. It's our responsibility to do that, but not necessarily to make the merchant feel like there's pain that when they're successful, that now they're having to be nickel and dimed for additional charges. That's a huge value proposition and a huge point why people who have already, any merchant who is already in the public cloud, many times prefers that we re-architect and that we own the cloud environment, so they don't have to worry about this fluctuated and variable billing. They get one simple bill every single month, and it's something that they can count on.
That's really advantageous, I would say. Okay,
Yeah.
so my last question to you is, it's
Sure.
a very general question, and it's regarding Magento 2. As a augmented reality, how does Magento 2 has blurred the line between online shopping and in-store shopping? So what's your perception on this, and how do you see this? And
Yeah, I
what
mean
you also, so I want to know, sir, what do you see the future of this, this online shopping, and role of Magento 2 in this? Because they are constantly evolving from Magento 1 to Magento 2, every time releasing a new version, new functionalities, and then they support these cloud services. So everything's these all things are coming together, and they are proceeding in this way. So
Right.
how do you of all these services and all these technologies coming together, and the role of Magento 2 in blurring the line between the online shopping and the in-store shopping?
Yeah. 2020 is the best indication of what Magento is capable of doing. Magento, the reason why it's become, and I keep saying Magento, I don't know, Adobe Commerce at this point, right? So let's, those are interchangeable right now. So, whether it's Magento 2 we're talking about, or the rebranded Adobe Commerce, it really was able to kind of flex what its capabilities were last year when, people who are already merchants who were already on the platform itself, all of a sudden had a need to increase functionality, to customize what was already built. You talk buy online, pick up in store capability. You talk connection into other third-party integrations to be able to meet their clients where they're at in a different fulfillment way than how they were, going into their brick and mortar storefronts before. A lot of changes needed to be made, and they needed to be made quickly, and they needed to be made for merchants across the entire globe. It was an amazing disruption event. It was also an amazing growth event in e-commerce. And I think Magento or Adobe Commerce handled itself well by being able to show that it is, the ultimate customizable application that can do whatever you need it to do, as long as you have the right development team working on it. And then again, from an infrastructure side of things, because Adobe Commerce continues to have an option to be able to, host the cloud delivery or the hosting environment, on-prem, where you own the environment, right? You own all of your data. You get to be extremely flexible in that as well. So if additional services or new custom routing capabilities are needed, that can all be done, right? So, again, we talk about marketplace functionality, we talk about buy online, pick up in store functionality, curbside pickup, right? Regardless, the fulfillment methods have changed, the delivery of products to clients has changed. And I think, it continues to be an application that can be modified, it can be optimized to fit your specific needs. And that's all the way from how it was built as core code to how you're able to actually host it on your own, personal cloud delivery environment.
Great. It was really enriching talking to you, and I really hope that do this kind of sessions more often, because I personally I got to learn a lot of things from you, and I am feeling enriched and more experienced now, just by discussing with you and getting all those answers from you. So I hope that I would be able to answer my clients on these queries better now. And so it was really nice talking with you, sir, and it was absolutely an honor for us to host you with this. So thank you so much for joining, sir.
Yep. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And if you do get a question like this, don't feel like you ever have to go at it alone. That's kind of the luxury and the thing that we pride ourselves in the partner side of the organization is making sure those lines of communication are open to you as a team. So if you ever need something, feel free to reach out to me directly or anybody on our team. And we can make sure to run any of those conversations with you side by side or support you in the conversations that you're having with your merchants. But again, I really appreciate you inviting me. This was great.
That's really generous of you, sir. We will be definitely contacting you personally. I'll be contacting you if I get any query, if I land up on any kind of queries. Thank you so much.